Donald Trump is back, and the Middle East he left 4 years ago no longer exists. While Washington prepares for the return of maximum pressure, Tehran has already drawn its line in the sand. It is a red line forged not in rhetoric, but in enriched uranium and ballistic steel. The Iranian leadership has sent a chilling message to the incoming administration. There will be no talks, no handshakes, and no concessions unless the United States abandons its primary weapon of economic warfare. But beneath this diplomatic wall lies a far more clinical reality. Iran is no longer playing for time. It is playing for the ultimate deterrent. This is not a crisis of ego between two leaders. This is a collision of hard power, strategic depth, and the cold logic of nuclear threshold politics. The board is set, the pieces are moving, and the window for a non-kinetic resolution is closing faster than the Pentagon can track. In the world of great power realism, intentions are secondary to capabilities. For 4 years, Iran has watched the global order fracture. They have seen the limitations of American power in the tunnels of Gaza and the fields of Ukraine. They have calculated that the cost of American intervention is rising while the price of defiance is becoming manageable. When Tehran says there will be no talks with Trump, they are not being emotional. They are asserting their position as a regional hegemon that has reached the nuclear doorstep. They understand that Trump's transactional nature requires a position of strength. To negotiate now, under the shadow of renewed sanctions, would be strategic suicide. Instead, Iran is choosing to escalate. They are betting that by the time Trump's cabinet is seated, the facts on the ground will be irreversible. The geography of this confrontation is centered on a single, terrifying location, Fordow. Buried deep within a mountain massif shielded by layers of reinforced concrete and hundreds of feet of solid rock, Fordow is the physical manifestation of Iran's strategic depth. It was built to be unreachable by conventional air power. This is not just a laboratory. It is a fortress of sovereignty. As Trump prepares to re-enter the Oval Office, reports indicate that Iran is ready to push its enrichment levels from 60% to the weapons-grade threshold of 90%. In the language of power, this is a countdown. It is a signal to Washington and Tel Aviv that the time for containment has passed. Iran is presenting the world with a fait accompli. They are forcing Trump to choose between a nuclear-armed Iran or a catastrophic regional war that would shatter the global energy market. The initial moves in this high-stakes game are already visible. As the Trump transition team signals a return to secondary sanctions to choke off Iranian oil exports to China, Tehran is preparing its counterpressure. They are not looking at the New York Stock Exchange. They are looking at the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb. If the American strategy is to bankrupt the Iranian state, the Iranian response is to make the cost of that bankruptcy unbearable for the West. For every shipment of Iranian crude blocked by American pressure, the IRGC has the capability to harass, seize, or kineticize the flow of 20% of the world's oil. This is the logic of asymmetric escalation. It is the realization that while the United States dominates the global financial system, Iran dominates the world's most critical maritime choke points. Washington's response is predictable, but increasingly strained. We see the deployment of carrier strike groups and B-52 bombers to the central command area of responsibility. But in the age of drone swarms and hypersonic missiles, a carrier is no longer an indisputable symbol of absolute power. It is a high-value target that requires massive logistical support to defend. The American deterrent is being tested by 1,000 cuts. The axis of resistance from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen functions as Iran's forward-deployed defense in depth. They are the buffer zones that ensure any American or Israeli strike on the Iranian heartland will trigger a multi-front firestorm. This is not a localized conflict. It is a regional architecture of deterrence that spans 3 seas and 5 nations. The escalation point arrives when the shadow war turns kinetic. Israel, viewing a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, is no longer content with sabotage or cyber attacks. The Israeli Air Force has spent years practicing long-range strikes, but the challenge is not just the distance, it is the penetration. To destroy Fordow, you need the GBU 5.7 massive ordnance penetrator, you need American heavy bombers, you need a level of commitment that Trump, who campaigned on ending forever wars, may be reluctant to provide. Iran knows this. They are betting on the friction between Trump's America First isolationism and his desire to project strength. By refusing to talk, Iran is daring Trump to start a war that would define his entire presidency and likely collapse the fragile post-pandemic global economy. But there is a new variable in the equation that did not exist in 2016, the Russian Federation. The strategic partnership between Moscow and Tehran has evolved from tactical cooperation in Syria to a full-scale military alliance. Russia, bogged down in its own war of attrition against NATO-backed Ukraine, now views Iran as a critical source of military hardware and a vital flank against Western hegemony. The rumors of Su-35 flankery fighters and S-400 Triumph missile systems being delivered to Tehran change the calculus of any air campaign. If Iran gains advanced Russian electronic warfare suites and fourth-generation plus interceptors, the low-cost airstrike becomes a high-loss air war. This is the integration of Iranian strategic depth into the broader Eurasian power bloc. It means that an attack on Iran is no longer an isolated incident. It is an attack on a key node of the anti-Western coalition. As the pressure builds, we must look at the strategic turning point. Iran's no-talks policy is a mechanism to buy the final months needed for a nuclear breakout. If Tehran can reach the threshold where they possess enough fissile material for several warheads, the entire balance of power in the Middle East shifts permanently. Once a state achieves nuclear capability, the logic of regime change dies. The United States would have to shift from a policy of denial to a policy of management, much as it has with North Korea. This would be a humiliating blow to American prestige and a signal to every middle power that the American security umbrella is leaking. For the Gulf monarchies, a nuclear Iran means they must either seek their own nuclear weapons or reach a grand accommodation with Tehran, effectively ending the era of American dominance in the Persian Gulf. The logistical reality of a full-scale confrontation is staggering. To truly neutralize Iran's military capabilities, the United States would need to sustain a campaign of a scale not seen since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. But unlike 2003, the adversary today has tens of thousands of precision-guided munitions and a domestic defense industry that is battle-hardened. The U.S. defense industrial base is already struggling to replenish munitions sent to Ukraine and Israel. Can Washington afford a third front? Can it maintain the naval presence required to keep the sea lanes open while simultaneously preparing for a contingency in the Taiwan Strait? The answer is likely no. This is the overstretch that Paul Kennedy warned about, and Iran is exploiting it with clinical precision. The consequences for the regional power balance are profound. We are witnessing the birth of a multipolar Middle East. If Trump tries to squeeze Iran and fails to stop their nuclear program, he will have inadvertently accelerated the decline of American influence. The red line drawn by Tehran is a test of will, but more importantly, it is a test of reality. It challenges the assumption that the United States can still dictate terms to a regional power with significant strategic depth and powerful allies. The Iranian leadership is betting that Trump, for all his fire and fury, is a businessman who understands a bad deal when he sees one. And a war with Iran, in the current global climate, is the worst deal imaginable for a president who wants to focus on domestic renewal and the rise of China. In the final analysis, we are approaching a moment of truth. The Iranian refusal to negotiate is a calculated move to force the United States into a position of strategic paralysis. If Trump ignores the red line and ramps up sanctions, Iran goes nuclear. If Trump attacks, he triggers a regional conflagration that destroys his economic agenda. If Trump concedes and lifts sanctions to get a new deal, he proves that Iran's strategy of resistance actually works. There are no easy exits. The map of the Middle East is being redrawn not by diplomats in Geneva, but by the centrifugal force of power and the cold, hard reality of the mountain at Fordow. The shadow of the 1979 revolution still looms large, but the Iran of 2025 is a different beast. It is a state that has mastered the art of surviving under siege and has now decided that the best defense is a relentless nuclear-backed offense. As the new administration takes power in Washington, they will find that the art of the deal does not apply when the other side has already decided that the deal is irrelevant. Power recognizes power. And right now, Iran is building a level of power that the West has spent 40 years trying to prevent. The question is no longer if the red line will be crossed, but what the world looks like once it is. The global order is at a crossroads. The confrontation between Trump II and the Islamic Republic will determine the price of oil, the stability of Europe, and the future of nuclear proliferation for the next 50 years. It is a struggle where geography dictates the tactics and logistics determines the victor. As the rhetoric fades and the carrier groups move into position, the cold logic of realism remains. Iran has made its move. The mountain is deep. The centrifuges are spinning. And the clock is ticking toward a new era of great power competition, where the old rules of American hegemony no longer apply. The red line is not just a warning, it is the beginning of a new, more dangerous chapter in the history of the Middle East. This is the ultimate test for the return of Donald Trump. Can he break the Iranian will without breaking the world? Or will the red line drawn in Tehran become the monument to the end of the American century in the Middle East? The answer lies in the tunnels of the Iranian plateau and the decision-making rooms of the Kremlin in Beijing. The age of unchallenged American dictates is over. The age of the hard realist has begun. Every move from here on out is a step toward either a new, grim stability or a fire that will consume the global status quo. The world is watching, but in the halls of power in Tehran, they aren't just watching, they are preparing for the storm.